Nairobi shimmered like a jewel in the morning sun, and Mwangi Mwita moved through it like a prince born to rule. Son of the famous banker, Charles Mwita, Mwangi's life was a parade of privilege, chauffeured cars, designer clothes, and nights that glittered with champagne and city lights. Money flowed like music, laughter echoed through the mansion halls. But beneath the luxury lay a quiet arrogance, the belief that wealth was permanent, and discipline was for the poor. At 23, Mwangi had never handled a single shilling with care. His father's credit cards were his passport to pleasure, and his name opened doors faster than keys. Yet the winds of fortune were shifting. A crisis brewed silently in the boardrooms of his father's bank, and the golden life he knew was about to crumble like sandcastles before a tide. At the Mwita mansion, the air turned heavy. Late-night calls, meetings behind closed doors, and the silence of his father's eyes told a story no one dared to voice. Mwangi ignored the tension, hosting parties, revving sports cars through wastelands, and laughing away warnings from his mother. But on a quiet evening, he overheard two of his father's associates whispering about missing funds and central bank investigations. Mwangi felt a shiver, but pride silenced concern. Father always wins, he told himself. But not this time. In the marble halls that once echoed with laughter, fear was beginning to whisper in every corner, fear that money could vanish, and with it, the identity built upon it. The news broke like a thunderstorm. Mwita Bank under investigation flashed across every screen. Customers lined up in panic, investors fled, and the empire Charles Mwita built began to crumble. Within days, government auditors sealed the offices, freezing accounts and properties. Mwangi's friends vanished like smoke. At home, his father sat in silence, aged by shame. The mansion felt like a museum of forgotten dreams. When the police came with documents, Mwangi realized the cars, the house, the luxury were not truly his. He was about to learn what life without privilege felt like. Mwangi and his parents were forced to leave their estate in Rwanda. For the first time, he saw his mother weep. They moved into a small flat in Keol, far from the life of manicured lawns. The city that once bowed to his father now looked away. Stripped of comfort, Mwangi felt anger, not for injustice, but for humiliation. He blamed everyone except himself. Yet in the quiet nights, when he looked out at the dim lights of the city, he wondered who he was without wealth. The boy who had owned everything now owned only his name, and even that felt heavy. Keol was alive in ways Mwangi never imagined. The streets hummed with music, chatter, and hustle. People woke before dawn to sell mandotsi, border riders shouted greetings, and children laughed barefoot through puddles. Life was harsh but full of purpose. Mwangi, ashamed of his new surroundings, avoided neighbors. But hunger has no pride, and when he could no longer rely on his father's fading savings, he stepped outside in search of work. The city, once his playground, had become his teacher. Mwangi met Mama Injeri, a stall owner who sold chapati by the roadside. She was tough, witty, and disciplined, every coin accounted for. When Mwangi asked for a meal on credit, she laughed. "You can wash plates for it, mtoto wa banka." That day, as he scrubbed dishes under the hot sun, something shifted. For the first time, Mwangi earned a meal. It tasted better than any restaurant feast he'd ever had. Mama Injeri smiled at him. "Money is a good servant," she said, "but a terrible master." Her words would stay with him forever. Mwangi began helping at the food stall regularly. The work was hard, but it taught him rhythm of sweat, customers, then counting coins. Each evening, Mama Injeri would balance her sales with precision. "Discipline," she'd say, "is how you respect money." Mwangi watched her grow small profits into stability. She saved, reinvested, and still gave leftovers to hungry children. He began to see wealth differently, not as a possession, but as a seed that needed patience and care. One night, Mwangi's mother called. His father had fallen ill, depression and disgrace eating away at him. Mwangi's heart ached, but he had no money for transport. He sat outside the food stall, tears in his eyes, realizing that once he couldn't count his blessings, then now he couldn't count his coins. That night he made a vow beneath the Nairobi stars: he would learn the language of money, not for power, but for peace. Mama Njeri introduced Mwangi to Uncle Otieno, a retired accountant who ran a youth savings group. Otieno saw potential in the young man's humility and took him under his wing. He taught Mwangi how to record expenses, track income, and plan for growth, even if it was just 10 shillings a day. Mwangi learned fast, his sharp mind now fueled by purpose. For every shilling he saved, he felt richer in character. The old Mwangi was fading; in his place, a new man was quietly being born. Months passed. Mwangi began helping others at the stall understand simple budgeting. Street vendors started trusting his advice. His savings box grew heavier, and so did his confidence. One evening, Mama Njeri said, "You were born a banker's son, but now you're earning the title." Mwangi smiled, humbled. He realized discipline was not punishment, it was freedom. The scent of frying chapati and the hum of Nairobi nights filled Mwangi's world. By now, he had learned to wake before sunrise, clean the stall, and prepare for the morning crowd. Yet beneath his growing humility burned a quiet dream: to teach others what he was learning about money and purpose. He began writing short lessons in an old notebook: save first, spend later, record everything. When curious customers asked about the scribbles, he'd explain, shyly at first, then with passion. Soon, people started calling him a Mwangi the scholar. What began as survival was slowly turning into service. Mama Njeri trusted Mwangi enough to let him run the stall for a day while she visited her sister. He felt honored, but temptation came. A friend from his old life, Kevin, appeared, driving a borrowed car and laughing at Mwangi's apron. "Bro, leave this nonsense," he sneered. "Let's go have fun like before." Mwangi looked at the cash box. He could easily take a few notes, no one would know. But he remembered Mama Njeri's words: character is what you do when no one is watching. He closed the box, wiped his hands, and smiled. "I've already had enough fun, Kevin. Now, I'm building something real." News spread through Keole that a young man could explain money better than most adults. Vendors came to him for advice: fruit sellers, mechanics, border riders. Mwangi started evening talks by the roadside using chalk on a wall, teaching budgeting with coins and bottle caps. He spoke of discipline, saving, and respect for every shilling. Even children gathered, wide-eyed, learning through play. The slum became his classroom, and Mwangi, once a lost heir, became a teacher of hope. One morning, a familiar car stopped by the roadside stall. Mwangi's mother stepped out, tears in her eyes. "Your father, he's asking for you," she said. Charles Mwita, once the proud banker, was now frail and quiet, living in shame. When Mwangi entered the small apartment, his father's voice trembled. "Son, I failed you. I built an empire but not a legacy." Mwangi knelt beside him. "No, Papa. You taught me what to rebuild, not with money, but with meaning." For the first time in years, father and son found peace in humility. With his savings and a few donations, Mwangi dreamed of starting a community project, a small youth savings club called the Future Jar. But landlords demanded rent, and city officials harassed street vendors. The little he had was barely enough to keep his plan alive. Still, he refused to quit. "If I can't start big, I'll start small," he said. He began holding meetings under a tree near the market. A handful of youth attended, but he taught with passion as if speaking to hundreds. Great things, he believed, begin with faithful little steps. One night, thieves broke into Mama Njeri's stall and stole everything: food, utensils, even her cash box. She sat by the ruins at dawn, defeated. Mwangi joined her silently, then said, "We can rebuild." He used half his savings to buy flour and oil, and together, they reopened within days. That gesture changed everything. The community saw his loyalty and rallied to help. From that day, Mama Njeri called him my son. In losing money, he had gained family and deeper wealth. Uncle Otieno began mentoring Mwangi in business strategy. To grow, he said, you must learn systems, not just effort. Mwangi began helping small traders organize their sales using notebooks and simple calculations. Profits improved, and people started calling him Mwalamu wa Pesa, the teacher of money. He realized something powerful: knowledge was a currency, and the more he shared, the richer he became, not in his pockets, but in his purpose. A banker from Mwangi's past recognized him and offered a job, an easy office position with good pay. It was a shortcut back to luxury. Mwangi hesitated, he missed comfort. But when he visited the office, he saw the same greed and arrogance that had destroyed his father. He walked away, choosing service over salary. I'd rather build slow wealth than live in fast ruin, he whispered, stepping back into the sunlight of Keoli's streets. Mwangi's youth club grew to 50 members. They pooled small savings each week, learning how to plan and invest together. He taught them to save for school, emergencies, and future businesses. Parents began noticing change, children became more responsible, vendors more disciplined. What started as survival had turned into a movement. Mwangi's dream was no longer about restoring his name, it was about restoring hope in others. One afternoon, Mwangi received a letter bearing the logo of the old Mwita Bank. The bank had been reorganized under new ownership. Inside was a note from a former board member. We've heard of your work in Keol. Your story inspires us. Would you speak at our Youth Finance Forum? Mwangi's hands trembled. The same halls that once symbolized his downfall were now inviting him back, not as the banker's son, but as the man who had learned what banking truly meant. Walking into the corporate hall, Mwangi felt memories rush back: marble floors, polished suits, the world of power. But this time, he wore a simple shirt and confidence earned through struggle. When he spoke, silence filled the room. He shared his journey, from riches to rags to redemption. Executives, students, and bankers listened with tears. Money, he said, is not meant to rule us. It's meant to serve our purpose. The applause that followed wasn't for the banker's son, it was for the man who had found his worth. After the speech, Mwangi received offers to train youth groups across Nairobi. He accepted, not for fame but for impact. With support from NGOs and Mama Njeri's guidance, he founded the People's Finance Initiative, a grassroots education program teaching saving and entrepreneurship. He employed local teachers and mentors, empowering hundreds. For the first time since his fall, Mwangi's work began to echo across the city, not in banks, but in hearts. Success brought attention, and with it, temptation. Partners offered quick expansion deals, some shady, others glamorous. Mwangi remembered his father's downfall and refused to compromise values for speed. He told his team, growth without integrity is cancer. They nodded, inspired by his firmness. Slowly but surely, the People's Finance Initiative became known for transparency, a light in a city often shadowed by corruption. Mwangi's father, now recovering, began attending his son's community events quietly. Watching Mwangi teach young people what he once failed to embody filled him with both pride and tears. One day, he took Mwangi's hand. You have done what I could not. You have made money human. Mwangi smiled softly. No, Papa. I only learned to listen to what money was trying to teach us. Their bond, once fractured by greed, was now healed by humility. A fire broke out in the market one night, destroying the stalls, including Mama Njeri's. It felt like a cruel repeat of loss. But Mwangi didn't panic. He organized the youth savings group to assist vendors using their emergency funds. Within days, they rebuilt. The press covered the story, "Slum Youth Rebuild Market Through Savings." Mwangi realized his lessons had truly taken root. The people no longer depended on charity, but on collective discipline. The media began calling Mwangi the new banker, a man redefining wealth from the ground up. Universities invited him to speak, schools began teaching his simplified finance model. But Mwangi remained grounded. Every Sunday, he still shared breakfast with Mama Injeri and Uncle Otieno under the same tree where his journey began. "Never forget where you learned the real value of money," Otieno reminded him. Mwangi never did. An international NGO invited Mwangi to represent Kenya at a global youth conference in South Africa. Nervous yet honored, he accepted. On stage, he spoke not of investments or profits, but of discipline, dignity, and service. When he finished, delegates from around the world stood to applaud. A journalist later asked, "What drives you, Mr. Mwita?" Mwangi smiled. "The memory of hunger, and the desire to make sure no lesson I learned goes to waste." Back home, corporate investors offered him a lucrative deal to start a commercial finance company. It promised millions. But it also required abandoning his grassroots work. Mwangi struggled. Was it time to grow or stay true? He visited the slum that night, walking past children he had mentored, hearing them laugh. The answer came softly, "Never trade your purpose for your profit." He declined the offer and instead expanded his initiative through community funding. His wealth would remain with the people. 5 years after his fall, Mwangi organized a citywide youth finance festival, a celebration of saving, innovation, and hope. Thousands gathered, from slums to suburbs, to share stories of progress. Discipline built this movement, not miracles. We can all rise, 1 shilling, 1 choice, 1 dream at a time. As the sun set over Nairobi, Mwangi looked out at the sea of faces. His journey had come full circle. From a spoiled heir to a humble reformer, he had learned that fulfillment was not found in what you earn, but in what you empower others to become. In the city of hustle and dreams, one man rediscovered wealth, not in banks or balance sheets, but in the disciplined hearts of ordinary people. Mwangi Mwita, the banker's son, became the people's banker, a reminder that from humility grows true greatness. Mwangi's work had outgrown Nairobi. Letters poured in from Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania. Youth groups across East Africa wanted guidance. One message from a Ugandan teacher read, "You turned coins into courage. Come teach us how." The world was calling. But Mwangi hesitated. Travel meant leaving his foundation behind. That night, he sat under the same tree where it all began, hearing the hum of the city. "Purpose must move," he whispered. The next day, he boarded a bus to Kampala with a small bag and a big hat. In Uganda, Mwangi was greeted by eager youth but skeptical officials. They saw him as just a slum teacher. Instead of arguing, he went to the markets, teaching traders how to track their earnings with chalk on wooden crates. Weeks later, profits increased. Local radio caught wind of it, calling his approach the people's economics. By the time he left Uganda, his simple system had spread to 4 towns. Mwangi realized real impact doesn't need wealth, it needs willingness. Back home, not everyone celebrated his rise. A few local politicians saw Mwangi's growing influence as a threat. Rumors began to spread that he misused donations, that his group was a front for foreign agendas. Mwangi was hurt, but Mama Injeri told him gently, "When light shines bright, shadows will always appear. Keep walking." He focused on truth, not talk. And the people who knew him best stood by him, stronger than ever. Kevin, the old friend from Mwangi's lavish past, returned, now broken, jobless, and lost in debt. Mwangi welcomed him, gave him food, and offered a chance to work with the youth group. But Kevin, still trapped in greed, stole a portion of the organization's funds and vanished. Mwangi felt betrayed but refused bitterness. He told the youth, "Even betrayal is a teacher." It reminds us that not all who walk with you share your destination. He tightened systems, wiser but not harder. Mwangi began dreaming of something greater, a school, not for academics, but for financial freedom. A place where discipline, business, and service could be taught together. He named it the African Financial Freedom Academy. Land was scarce, funding even scarcer. But when people had the vision, donations began trickling in, coins, bricks, even volunteer labor. Slowly, the walls began to rise, built not by investors, but by believers. Charles Mwita, Mwangi's father, now fully recovered, visited the half-built academy. He was quiet for a long time, then said softly, "I once built a tower that fell. You're building people who will stand." Mwangi embraced him, both men tearful. Charles offered his last bit of savings to fund the library. "Let this be the room where my mistakes become lessons," he said. And so, the Mwita Memorial Library was born, a sanctuary of wisdom built from failure. As Mwangi's fame spread, large sponsors approached, offering millions to expand operations. But the contracts were poisoned, hidden clauses meant to take ownership of his initiative. Mwangi spent sleepless nights studying every line. Finally, he refused the deal. "If money costs integrity," he said, "it's too expensive." The sponsors withdrew, and for months, progress stalled. Yet his faith stood firm, for he had learned that real wealth walks slowly. To keep morale alive, Mwangi began a weekly radio segment called Pesa no Maisha, Money and Life. Each episode was part lesson, part story. Soon, thousands tuned in every Saturday to hear his calm, rhythmic voice guiding them through savings, loans, and honest living. Even taxi drivers and street sweepers called him Mwalamu wa Radio. Through the airwaves, he reached those who would never step inside a classroom, the true heartbeat of the continent. With growth came pressure, endless meetings, interviews, then travel. Mwangi barely slept. One night, he fainted mid-speech. The doctor warned, "Your body is rich in stress, not rest." He took a break, returning to Keol to breathe. Sitting with Mama Injeri, he ate chapati and tea, laughing again. "Don't let success steal your soul," she said. "The goal is peace, not applause." He nodded, realizing that balance is the highest form of discipline. A letter arrived from the president's office, inviting Mwangi to serve as an advisor for national youth financial programs. The banker's son, once homeless, was now asked to guide a nation. Standing before the mirror that night, he saw not pride, but purpose reflected back. He whispered, "Let me remain small, even in great rooms." The next day, he accepted the role, with humility as his badge. Government life was a battlefield of ego and greed. Mwangi faced resistance when he proposed transparency reforms. "Too idealistic," they said. "You'll slow things down." He smiled. "Maybe slow is good if it keeps us honest." Some laughed, others admired his courage. Over time, his consistent integrity began to shift even hardened hearts. People started whispering, "There's still hope for Kenya." One afternoon, Mwangi visited his old school to give a talk. Standing in the same hall where he once bragged about wealth, he told students, "I failed life's first exam, discipline. But I passed the retake." Laughter filled the room, followed by reflection. He donated new books and started a mentorship program. The same teachers who once doubted him now spoke his name with pride. Fame grew louder, and so did doubt. Was Mwangi becoming too comfortable in recognition? Was he still the humble son of the slums? Late one night, he asked himself that question in prayer. The next morning, he went alone to the market, helping vendors sell again for a day. As sweat rolled down his face, he smiled. "This," he whispered, "is who I am." The applause of the world meant nothing compared to the gratitude of one market woman. During a heavy downpour, Mwangi took shelter under a tin roof where poor children huddled, drenched. He gave them his jacket and bought roasted maize for all. One boy looked up and said, "When I grow up, I want to be rich like you." Mwangi smiled gently. "Then start by being kind, that's the first currency." Those words later became the motto of his academy. Mwangi was invited to address the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. Leaders from 50 nations sat before him. He spoke not with grandeur, but with truth. Africa doesn't lack money, it lacks mindset. We chase luxury instead of legacy. The hall fell silent. His words echoed across media channels worldwide. For the first time, a slum teacher had shaken a continent's conscience. Success bred enemies. A group of corrupt officials framed Mwangi for embezzlement to silence his influence. His accounts were frozen, his reputation questioned. The community he'd built refused to believe the lies. Youth protested, chanting, "Truth cannot be jailed." After weeks of investigation, he was cleared, every record spotless. Mwangi walked free, his name brighter than before. Kevin, the friend who once betrayed him, reappeared, sick, broken, and ashamed. Mwangi took him in, paid for his treatment, and gave him work again, this time supervising the market youth group. "Why help me?" Kevin asked weakly. "Because forgiveness is the wealth only the poor in spirit can afford," Mwangi replied. The two men embraced, the past finally healed. Charles Mwita passed away peacefully in his sleep. Mwangi held the funeral under the tree where they had reconciled. His father's final letter read, "I gave you money and you lost it. You gave me wisdom, and I found peace. My legacy lives through you." Tears fell like rain. Mwangi vowed that every student who entered his academy would carry that same lesson, that wealth without character is poverty in disguise. Graduates from Mwangi's academy began spreading across Africa, teaching savings in villages, entrepreneurship in cities, and honesty in government offices. Mwangi called them the torchbearers. Watching them teach others, he realized his mission was no longer his alone. "I planted a seed," he said, smiling. "Now the forest grows." Mwangi visited the place where his fall began, the tiny room in Keol where he once slept hungry. It was now a youth center. He stood there, touched the wall, and whispered, "Thank you for humbling me." Children ran past, laughing. He saw himself in their eyes, not the old Mwangi of pride, but the new Mwangi of purpose. A Pan-African organization invited him to co-found the African Wealth Education Network, linking 20 nations in financial literacy. Mwangi accepted, determined to make youth empowerment Africa's new gold rush. His motto was simple: teach one, lift 10. The dream of one man was now becoming a continental revolution.